All right, everyone, it's 420, which means it's time for another anti-drug war rant here, because it can't be said enough, because so often people focus, they think they're progressive because they're like, oh, well, I have smoked weed. Okay, that's great. Like, marijuana can be, I guess useful for like glaucoma and pain and certain other things, like certain side effects from leukemia treatment, like cancer treatment, when you get chemo and your hair falls out and you can't hold food down and puke it all back up. And the weed, I guess, for some people anyway, it helps them, suppress the gag reflex, basically. I think if someone's life can be improved, especially if they're seriously ill or whatever, by marijuana, they should be able absolutely to use it. I was an early and often proponent of at least the medical side. Very quickly realized, the drug war doesn't work anyway. It should just be fully legal. If people want to grow small amounts, they shouldn't even need a license. That's what I believe in. That's essentially, thankfully, the system we're going to be getting this summer in Vermont, which is you can have a mature plant, you can have some juvenile. I think it's 2 mature plants, 6 juvenile plants, up to an ounce of prepared material is fully legal, and beyond that is, I think, still decriminalized. But if you're dealing it, you have to have, like, you'd be selling to a dispensary or something. Giving it away, I think, will also be legal. It's not like you're not actually paying for it, but it's unofficial money, I guess, at that point. It still breaks federal law, though. The federal government still considers marijuana to have no health benefits. It is considerably dangerous, and that's how they arrive at their drug scheduling levels. The top schedule for the drugs that are on the DEA's drug scheduling at all. That means high potential for abuse, specifically like getting addicted to it. No established medical benefits, and significant harm. None of these things are true for marijuana. Not all 3 are true for virtually any of the top scheduled substances. Look, but they're certainly true at this point for morphine. Look, the fact that it relieves pain, so does marijuana. Well, I would say that's a medical benefit. It probably does better at some things. I would say the potential for abuse with opiates is self-evident at this point. That's the real societal problem, was the legal substances all along. Tobacco was a societal problem. We've been snuffing that out. We've been putting out the butts, so to speak. Like I quit smoking increasingly. A lot fewer millennials smoke than people in the boomer generation. A lot of them quit too. Generation Z, the number of people who smoke in Gen Z is extremely small compared to history. That's a great thing, by the way. It's great that we're managing to make that headway on a substance that actually does cause significant harm. It is significantly addictive. It is significantly harmful. It's just the average person, they kill themselves over 30 or 40 years as opposed to, well, I overdosed this one time. Most people are at least smart enough not to shove the whole pack in their mouth and light it with a blowtorch. I saw this weird channel once because I was looking up smoking. And my goodness, it was some dude. Apparently it was a smoking fetish or something for him, and he was all like fucked up. He looked about 20 years older than he probably should have, and was like, hippie Dan mode, and he would, like, I guess, put 4 or 5 cigs in his mouth and just smoke them at the same time, and it was very strange. And I put that on the Facebook page because I'm like, this is ultimate troll bait. And unfortunately he closed his channel, so you can't troll him anymore. But there's weird shit like that. But by and large, smoking, which used to be seen as sexy or American or normal, we no longer do. And that's an actual harmful substance. As opposed to psychedelics and marijuana, which largely are not. Most of the psychedelics are not addictive at all. Chemically speaking, there's no addiction potential. And in some cases, it's actually reverse. For instance, with psilocybin. Physically speaking, for some time after the use of psilocybin, the body tends to have an aversion to using it again. It's self-regulating for a lot of people. You would think of quickly building up a tolerance. For instance, people report that with LSD. They use it. If they try to use it again in the span of too short a time, it won't have much of an effect. Therefore, it is, again, potentially self-regulating. As far as habituation, I think you'll find that the average person in the commission of their average life, at the very most, it'd be like a Friday night party thing, like a once-a-week thing. The average person is not going to be able to function at work on mescaline. They're not going to be able to undergo normal social interactions on most of the psychedelics. And having used these, I think matters. Because I've actually used most of these substances, and I can tell you, in my own experience, The one substance that really fucked me up was legal, and I've spoken about my overdose on spice. It was legal at the time I was using it. Now, you could manufacture and sell it. It would have been perfectly legal. They quickly regulated that side, which I agree with. That's a good thing, but it needs to be paired with full legalization of pot. There's no reason for people to use chems, to use synthetic substances, if they can just use marijuana. There's no reason for it. I extend this to the psychedelics. People are using all sorts of weird out there things like, oh yeah, I think that I'll take nutmeg, like that's going to be a great idea. Instead of using substances about which there is research that's been conducted saying it can be medically beneficial. In most cases, it's non-addictive. Harm is a different thing. Of course, if you take shrooms and try to drive, that could be a little bit of a problem. But generally speaking, for the average user utilizing an average dose, they're not going to fuck up their life unless they get caught on it and they get shot by a cop or they get thrown in jail and get, fucked up the ass full of AIDS or something. They get hepatitis in prison. That might endanger them. Oh, my liver's failing. Thanks, Uncle Sam. You saved me from the devil's weed. We have actual cases where this sort of thing happens. You take some happy hippie who just wants to smoke weed and drop acid, put him in jail, all of a sudden, now they know how to make a shiv. Now they know how to jimmy locks. Now they know about the wonders of stealing cars to feed now their heroin addiction. Oh, here, try this, hippie. It's way better than the green stuff. It's also easier to smuggle in here because, the guards know half of you are addicted to it anyway. And that's basically what happens. Case in point about the drug war not working. Getting it out on the streets is one thing. Charles Manson was found in his cell to have acid on, I think, 3 or 4 different occasions. He had managed to smuggle acid, marijuana, and all sorts of stuff into a prison, a high-security prison, while being Charles Manson, notably noted for smuggling things anyway and on having generally bad behavior, and he could still obtain drugs apparently anytime that he wanted. How easy do you think it is out on the street then? You can get drugs in any university. Trust me, I went to UVM, literally pot-smoking university, hippie and Birkenstock #1, literally the green university of all time, like the most notorious stoner campus in the country. Yeah, there were a lot of drugs floating around. It was an off day when you didn't smell pot at some point on your way to class. Oh yeah, I smelled it 3 times today. I think I identified 3 different strains of marijuana. You'd see people that were blitzed on all sorts of psychedelics that obviously did something other than pot and weren't just drunk. Yeah. This is something that can't be defeated by legalism, essentially. You can't win the drug war. It's not really meant to be won, by the way. That's the other thing. The drug war is simply meant to drag on and to create a slave class of individuals for cheap labor. Literally, I hate to say this, but when the left complains about a prison lobby, they are fundamentally correct, absolutely. There is a very powerful, very moneyed corporate prison complex in the United States that ties into and attempts to control police unions and groups like that. And it's a problem. It's a problem of corrupt money. It's literally modern-day slavery after a fashion. These people are justifying their own existence. How are you supposed to justify continuing to operate a for-profit prison if all of a sudden all the non-violent drug offenders aren't in prison anymore? You're going to have to find other people to make criminals. Something's going to have to give. Otherwise, you'll go out of business. The problem being that prison complex over time has grown to untenable levels. There's a reason why we put more people in prison than any other country. It's because we've injected profit motive, and it shouldn't be a profit motive. States should have to run all of the prisons. States and towns should be the ones running them. There shouldn't be a profit motive at all. If anything, it should harm the taxpayers and cost a lot to run them in the most direct sense without any possibility of making that money back. That way, hopefully, people will be more reluctant to create new crimes to throw people into prison for. If society has an obligation to actually pay for those they're throwing into prison, maybe they'll do it less often. Maybe they'll realize that Harold the Happy Hippie ultimately is not a societal threat. The cost of locking him up for several years for having too many pot plants is astronomically higher than the cost to society of him smoking weed. Oh, he's still doing a job? Who cares then? Who cares if he smokes weed? No, but 420 shouldn't just be about legalized marijuana. It should be about all of the other soft substances. As for the hard ones, the ones that are harmful and addictive, well, then treat addiction. It's not really they're a criminal. In some cases, the first time they used it, they didn't realize that that was the drug they were getting anyway. And yet we blame them as a society as though they were bad people, even though the worst that you could say about them in that situation is, well, you should have known what you were getting a hold of. Okay, well, the damage is done. Let's give them another chance at life and at least try to rehabilitate them. Because it's not happening right now with our current system. Our system costs a lot, yields bad, terrible results, directly and indirectly. The cost is not worth what we get out of it. We get basically nothing. We just get kicked in the crotch some more when we put people in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. And look at me. Again, using myself as an example, having smoked weed, I did acid, this is all years ago, like almost a decade now. I did shrooms and mescaline and all these things. I used a lot of drugs. Do I seem like I'm totally blasted, like, you have the typical stereotype of the burnout? He smoked too much weed, now he's just dumb. He says off-the-wall shit all the time. Or do I seem coherent? Am I capable of having a rational debate, a rational conversation? See, the whole devil's weed, reefer madness, acid craze, you died on one dose of ecstasy, all that stuff, it's propaganda. It's just government propaganda to try to keep people from using drugs in the first place. The idea was just say no, don't ever use it, because then, magically you'll become an addict. The problem is that propaganda never worked. If anything, it had a net negative impact, and probably it just told little Jimmy that these drugs existed so that he could research it himself, probably anecdotally, probably by obtaining it. That's ultimately what it did. It's a crazy war. It's less winnable than any of the Middle Eastern proxy wars and just as expensive. And it takes place on our own streets with our own citizens. I think we need to have a national discussion about at the very least decriminalizing a lot of the softer substances. Focus on heroin and crack and meth, things that are demonstrably actually dangerous and addictive. That's about all. Peace out.